informational session for the special town meeting. If you are able, please rise and join us in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So once again, welcome. And before I turn it over to Mike Degnan, our chair of the Finance Committee, I want to thank him for putting together this session, which is in direct response to a number of questions that this board and the Finance Committee received from residents as to why another special town meeting, what is the issue, how did we get here, those types of things. And that's what this is about. This is not whether we're going to debate yay, nay, sideways. As a matter of fact, it's not a debate. It's to answer the questions that we have been asked. Mike has put together a pretty tight presentation to do that. This will also be, it's going out live right now, it will also be available throughout the week on Channel 9, and it will also be available on demand through RehobothTV.org. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Mike go through and answer those questions that we have been asked. We will then entertain questions on statements. It's not an open public forum, not a debate, but questions related to the information that is contained in this presentation. The time for debate, the time for voicing opinions will be a town meeting, which will be next Tuesday. Okay? We will hold questions until the end of the presentation, because sometimes questions that you may have during get answered later on in the presentation, and also we don't want to be interrupting the flow. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. What the chair didn't mention is that I do somewhat have a hard stop this evening at 8:30, so it's our hope to get through this quickly. And as Jerry indicated, we'll be entertaining questions towards the end. So the four things really that we're going to talk about tonight is, first, we're going to talk about where we are and how did we get here. We're then going to have a brief discussion about the fiscal year 20 funding sources that we're using for the article. We're going to talk about the Finance Committee's fiscal year 20 budget summary and recommendations. How did we get to the recommendations that we presented to you in the warrant? And then finally, we're going to talk about what happens next. What happens at town meeting, what happens after town meeting, depending upon the choices that are made at town meeting. And then finally, we're going to have a couple of slides, a brief conclusion, and wrap up. So part one, how did we get here? Where are we? How did we get here? So before we really answer that question, we have to provide some background information to you to help you understand the context of the discussion tonight. The principal takeaway is that the town of Rehoboth does not have its own school department. We are a member of the Dayton-Rehoboth Regional School District, in addition to being a member of the Bristol Plymouth Vocational Regional School System, and also participating in the Bristol Aggie County High School. The Dayton-Rehoboth Regional School District was formed between an agreement several years, many years ago as a matter of fact, between the towns of Dayton and Rehoboth. And the current agreement that's in effect right now was signed in 1987. That is sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the regional agreement. Prior to 87, we had a school union where we shared a high school and we had our own K-8s. And the reason why I mention this is a lot of times, for long-time residents in Rehoboth, they say, geez, we always thought our K-8 was separate. We always maintain our own K-8. And that's the way it used to be years and years and years ago. But then it changed. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16 defines a regional school district shall be a body politic and corporate with all the powers and duties conferred upon law, or by law, upon school committees. The important information in this clause is the regional school system is its separate corporate entity from the town of Rehoboth. It is not a town department. Effectively, the regional school district is a vendor to the town of Rehoboth, which provides educational services to the children in our community. Just like Bristol Plymouth also provides vocational education services to the children in Rehoboth that decide to go to BP. Because the regional school district is its own corporate entity apart from the town, the regional school system independently builds its own budget. And then what it does, according to Mass General Law, is it then apportions that budget in what's referred to as an assessment, according to Mass General Law, in terms of the regional agreement, to the member communities that are part of that regional district. So that's why we get an assessment from the regional school system. We effectively get a bill for our portion of the operating and capital expenses associated with educating our children. So factors which come into play in terms of how regional school system budgets are created and then apportioned to the member communities, really there are two. The first is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Regulations and Massachusetts General Laws. These regulations define how the budgets are apportioned to the member communities up to what is referred to as the foundation budget. The foundation budget is a dollar amount that is established by DESE to provide a certain level of education to all of the children in the community. And then everything above the foundation budget is apportioned to the member communities according to the regional agreement. The process by which regional school system budgets are adopted by member communities is defined in Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16B. Paragraphs 1 through 5 take us up through May 28th town meeting. And effectively what they say is the district sets the budget and then it allocates it to the member communities via an assessment. The member communities then vote at town meeting to approve the budget and to vote to approve an appropriation to fund the assessment. So member communities were required to approve the budget of the regional school system every fiscal year. But you'll notice in the warrant, we don't actually have language that says, we hereby vote to approve the budget of the regional school system at X number of dollars. Because in Mass General Law, that same chapter and section, paragraph 10 says that if you vote an appropriation which equals the member community's assessment, that is considered approval of the budget. So if the regional school system says your assessment is $19.5 million and town meeting approves an appropriation of $19.5 million to fund that assessment, town meeting's effectively saying, we approve your budget. If town meeting votes an appropriation which does not equal the member community's assessment, that is considered rejection of the budget as a whole. That's what happened on May 28th. When the budget of the regional school system is rejected, paragraphs 6 through 8 of that clause of Mass General Law apply. So at May 28th town meeting, Rehoboth residents voted for an appropriation less than the assessment. The appropriation that we voted was $18.9 million. The assessment was $19.5 million. So that action constituted rejection of the regional school budget. So that's kind of where we're at. That brings us to MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B, Paragraph 6. And it states that the Regional School District Committee shall have 30 days to reconsider, amend, and resubmit a budget on the basis of the issues raised. That's direct out of Mass General Law. It also states, a copy of the amended budget shall be provided not later than 7 days from the date the amended regional school district budget was adopted by the regional school committee to the chairmen of the Board of Selectmen, chairman of the finance committees, and other entities. And then the key phrase, prior to the expiration of 45 days from the date on which such budget was adopted by the regional school district committee, each member municipality shall hold a meeting of the local appropriating authority, that's town meeting in our case, to act upon the appropriation of the budget so reapportioned and recertified to it. So, on May 28th, 471 of 699, or roughly 67.4% of the residents in attendance at town meeting ended up rejecting the budget of the regional school system by approving an appropriation less than the amount approved by the regional school committee. On June 4th, the regional school committee skipped over the 30-day reconsider and amend portion on the basis of the issues raised at town meeting in that clause of Mass General Law, and then they went directly to the resubmit stage. And what they did is they resubmitted an assessment to the town of Rehoboth on June 4th, exactly the same amount as what we voted on June 28th. So had they voted to reduce their assessment to match the appropriation made at town meeting, that would have ended the process immediately, and effectively that would have considered town meeting having adopted the budget. For those of you that are longtime attendees at town meeting, you will recognize that this process has actually happened in the past. We've gone to town meeting in the past. Some of you may remember Dave Katz, a tall, white-haired man. Right? He's gone up at town meeting in the past and made motions to increase the school committee appropriation at town meeting, and we've debated it. In some years we've approved it, and other years we've rejected it. In the years that we've rejected it, the school committee has gone back and they've lowered their assessment to match what town meeting voted. That didn't happen in this case. So instead, what happened is the regional school committee, which included 3 members from Rehoboth, voted to ignore your decision at town meeting and send the same exact assessment back to the town of Rehoboth. So that brings us to where we are today, which is Groundhog Day. We have to go back to town meeting and vote on the same exact thing that we voted on May 28th. Key takeaways from the previous clauses in Mass General Law. The selectmen have 45 days from June 4th to convene a special town meeting to vote on that same exact assessment. That law is written in Mass General Law. The vote of the regional school committee was June 4th, so we have 45 days from June 4th to hold town meeting. Now, there's been a lot of criticism of the selectmen. Well, why didn't we have town meeting right away? Why didn't we have it at the end of June before people went on vacation? Well, town bylaws state that a warrant for a special town meeting have to be in your hands 14 days prior to that event occurring. So whatever the day is of town meeting, take 14 days off of it. The warrant has to be in your hand within 14 days prior to town meeting. So right off the bat, you're losing 14 days. It also takes the selectman's office a couple of weeks to prepare the warrant, because they have to work with, for instance, the finance committee, the board of selectmen. They have to get the warrant printed. They have to take it to a print shop, for instance, get several thousand copies printed. Then they have to arrange for it to go to the United States Postal Service, and there's this whole process that we have to go through to actually get it out to you within that 14-day time frame. And so it takes about 2 weeks for us to do that, roughly. Sometimes it takes longer, but usually 2 weeks is about a good time frame. So When you work the numbers backwards, that's about a month right there. That's about 30 days. So you have, when you look at June 4th as being the day, 30 days would put you to roughly, the 4th of July, sometime around there. And that's actually really tight because the selectmen didn't act. The selectmen didn't meet on the 5th of June. So the selectmen actually acted on the warrant a time period after that. So that's where we're at. That's why we're going back to town meeting. Because we're required to go back to town meeting within 45 days of June 4th to act on the same exact article that we acted on May 28th, because that's what Mass General Law says that we have to do because of the actions on the 28th and the regional school committee not accepting the vote of town meeting on the 28th. So let's take a look at fiscal year 20 funding sources. Now, I'm not going to go through every single funding source that the town has, because funding sources, for those of you that have come to this presentation in years past, we can go through a lot of different numbers, and I'll end up boring the hell out of all of you until 9 o'clock tonight, and we won't be done. So, if you really want to know about town funding sources, I've actually prepared a rather comprehensive, it's a 2-hour video, so get the popcorn, get the family around, sit in the living room and watch it on Rehoboth TV. It's very fascinating, I'm sure you'll all find it real interesting. So we have this video, Town Finances 101, where we go through, actually 3 things. We go through what the role of the Finance Committee is. You've no doubt heard a lot of criticism of the Finance Committee over the past several weeks about how we're supposed to be responsible for all sorts of things like conjuring up money out of thin air. We also cover in that video the town's budgeting process. How do we go about creating the town budget from June, or I should say from January, all the way through town meeting in May or June, depending upon when we meet. And then the last part of it is a comprehensive discussion of all the funding sources that town meeting has available to it. And some funding sources are legally viable for certain articles and not for others. For example, on the warrant that you acted on in the special town meeting, there was an appropriation to take money out of the town's solar capital account to fund the purchase of the land at Dorrance Street. Legally, that fund can only be used for the purchase of land and repair of municipal buildings of government, of what's referred to as general government use. So one of the criticisms that was out there was, well, how come we're not using that money to fund capital projects in the school? Because legally, we can't. The way the law is written, we're not allowed to do that. So that funding source is only viable for certain types of articles at town meeting. So there are 2 links here, and a copy of this presentation will be up on the town's website when the town clerk posts it within the next day. So you can get access to these links. The first is the Rehoboth TV on demand link. This is the standard definition TV version. And there's also on the Rehoboth Community TV YouTube channel. There's also a high def version for those of you that watch on a computer. So if you have the time, I really highly encourage you to watch the video. It can get tedious, it can be a little boring, but at the end of it, you'll really know a lot about the town's funding sources, where they come from, how the Finance Committee works, how we create the town's budget, the financial policies that we use, and why we do for the town of Rehoboth what we do. So to fund an operating budget, we need to use what's referred to as recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is revenue that's going to be there every single year, year after year after year. This is a basic, sound financial policy that any financial advisor will tell you. Take, for example, your home mortgage. If you have to pay your home mortgage out of your savings account because you don't make enough money to pay your mortgage, how long is it going to be before you can't pay your mortgage any longer? Eventually, all the money in your savings account is going to run out. That's because your savings account is not a recurring revenue source. The town's recurring revenue source effectively amounts to its tax levy and various fees that it gets to charge for services each year. And we have these broken down. You actually can find a copy of this, it's not as colorful, in your town meeting warrant. And I think it's on page 10 of the current one, and I think it was on page 27, if I remember correctly, of the April town meeting warrant. So these revenue sources represent revenue that the town is going to generate every single year. And I'm going to talk briefly about what they are and how much we expect to raise. So the first three are the local taxes levy limit, the annual 2.5 increase, and then state aid local. Where do these numbers come from? You've undoubtedly heard a lot of tinfoil hat conspiracy theories over social media that we just make numbers out of thin air and we're really hiding money. We're not telling you really how much we intend to make. The revenue estimates that the Finance Committee uses have to stand the test of scrutiny with the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Each fall, when we go to set our tax rate, these revenue estimates are analyzed by the Department of Revenue, and if they don't agree with them, they'll kick it back to the town of Rehoboth and say, you need to change your revenue estimates because we don't agree with them. We're not going to allow you to set your tax rate. So we just don't conjure these numbers up out of thin air. These are real hard numbers that come to us from several different sources, either subject matter experts or the state itself. In the case of these three numbers, these come to us from the state. The State Department of Revenue provides us at the beginning of the budget season some estimates on what our fiscal year's tax levy is going to be and how much we can raise in our annual Prop 2.5 increase. So as you've heard, you've no doubt heard Proposition 2.5 states that the tax levy of the town can only go up 2.5% per year, right? So the town's tax levy for fiscal year 20, Department of Revenue said would be $24.3 million. And the Department of Revenue has indicated that our annual increase that we can expect to generate for this fiscal year is $610,000. That's the expected increase that we can have for our Prop 2.5, our legal Prop 2.5 increase without going for an override. Overrides are separate issues, completely. And then the third number that comes to us from the state is the state aid local number. This is also sometimes you may have heard this referred to as the cherry sheet. And that's different types of state aid that the state gives to us as part of the state budgeting process. Now again, these are in fact estimates that come from the state. These numbers can vary a little bit when we go to set the tax rate. They can be off a little bit. The state aid local number, that's a number that's built into the state budget. We don't really know that number until the state budget process is complete. Now, how many of you have been hearing news? I think I heard it on the news today, that the people are wondering, where's the state budget? The state budget hasn't been approved yet. So here it is. I mean, we had town meeting 2 months ago, right? We still don't really know what our state aid number is. Now, the State Department of Revenue does give us estimates. So during the budgeting process, we tend to budget on the conservative side. When it comes to state aid local, there are several different numbers. There's an estimate DOR provides us with, there's the House 1 budget, sometimes there's the governor's budget, and then there's the Senate budget, right? And then eventually what happens is they all go to a conference committee and they hash it out, they come out with a number. Well, we don't want to overestimate our revenue sources. Let's say we tacked on $50,000 onto that number, but then we ended up not getting the $50,000. Now we're short. So what we do when we look at our state aid local number is we take the lowest number because that's sort of the minimum that we expect to get. Then, if we get more, for those of you that come to town meeting in the fall, sometimes you'll hear us indicate to you that a funding source is raise and appropriate in the fall town meeting. That's generally because we ended up getting more state aid. So we have a little bit more state aid to appropriate out of quote unquote raise and appropriate, which is what all these funding sources collectively are referred to. So again, hard numbers from the state. For the ones that have some variability, like state aid, local, we go with a more conservative number, so we're not in a financial bind in 6 months if the number doesn't come in where we expect it to be. Another couple of revenue sources that comprise raise and appropriate: solar pilots and new growth. These figures come to us from the Board of Assessors. They are the subject matter experts on new growth and the amount of solar pilots that the town currently has in place, not the Finance Committee. Right, new growth is, again, we cover this in the Town Finances 101 video, but new growth is not an increase in your taxes. New growth is if you build a building on your property, you build a garage that wasn't there before. So your taxes go up because you've added value to your property. That's new growth. Somebody builds a new house in Rehoboth, that's new growth. Okay? New growth isn't your taxes went up by $400 this year. Solar pilots are the payment in lieu of taxes. Those are the agreements that are negotiated between the town and the solar farm operators. Those numbers, again, Finance Committee, we rely on the subject matter experts, the Board of Assessors, to provide us with those numbers. We don't have any idea how much new growth is going on. I mean, we can drive around Rehoboth and we can see the houses being built, but we're not assessors. We're not experts at how to assess a piece of property. That's why we elect a Board of Assessors. That's why we rely on their numbers when they give them to us. Debt exclusions. Debt exclusions are, as most of you know, temporary increases in the tax levy that you approve to fund some type of capital project. This number comes to us from the town treasurer. She maintains the debt schedules for the town of Rehoboth, not the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee isn't going to say, we think the debt exclusion should be $800,000 this year. It doesn't work that way. This is the number, this is a hard number that comes to us from the town treasurer. Now, part of that used to be, for those of you, again, in town long enough, we used to have a debt exclusion for this very building that we're in. That came off the tax rolls a couple of years ago. At the moment, all $783,000 of debt exclusions the town has passed are all for projects at the regional school system. If you look in your current warrant for the July 16th meeting, if you look at, again, I think it's page 10, where we actually show the breakdown of the regional school assessment and budget, you'll see next to the capital projects a dollar amount and when it was passed. And what you'll see an amount that's close to $10 million that this town has passed over the past decade to fund capital projects at the regional school system. So anybody who says that the town of Rehoboth does not support education is lying to you, plain and simple. The last three numbers that comprise raise and appropriate: meals tax, local receipts, and motor vehicle excise tax. I'm going to talk about all three of these a little bit. Meals tax, when you go to Hillside Country Club and you have a nice dinner, or you go down to Alive, you have a nice dinner, there's a little bit of an excise tax that's tacked onto your bill. That excise tax comprises of the meals tax. It's a local option that was implemented about 9 years ago. Local receipts is anything other than taxes that the town raises in terms of fees. So you have dogs, you license your dogs, that's part of local receipts. You take out a building permit to add an addition on your house, that's a local receipt. You pay some kind of fee to the town because you're going to open up a marijuana facility, so you need a license. You pay a fee to the town, that becomes a local receipt. Right? So local receipts are anything other than taxes, fees, interest that we may charge if you're late on a payment, stuff like that. And then finally, motor vehicle excise tax. Motor vehicle excise tax, of sort of the local dollar amounts that we raise, motor vehicle excise tax is the largest component of the three. It also has the most variability because of the way it's computed. So I'll talk a little bit about each one of these, but these figures come to us from the town accountant. She does an analysis based upon prior year history and trends that she sees, and she gives us some estimates on where she thinks what we should budget. The reason I list these in yellow is because these are the three numbers that the Finance Committee can really analyze and make some adjustments to, and we have over the years. We've gone back and we've made adjustments to these numbers over what the town accountant has recommended because of budgetary pressures that have been put on us as a result of rising expenses associated with government. The first one I'll talk about is the meals tax. Now, when we prepare the budget for fiscal year 20, we're still in fiscal year 19. So you see this chart here. The way this chart reads, you see this fiscal year 19 number. The reason why there aren't three values here is because we were still in fiscal year 19 when we were preparing the budget for fiscal 20. So the only real numbers we have to go on that are hard numbers are the prior fiscal year, which was fiscal year 18. Just keep in mind, we were preparing the budget for the town and looking at these numbers back around March, February. We're still in fiscal year 19. So we don't really know what the collections are going to be. There are three numbers here. The actual collections, the budgeted collections, and what goes to free cash. You've heard the term free cash bantered about quite a bit. Anything, any revenue that the town generates in excess of its estimate is considered, at the end of the year, it rolls into free cash. So if we budget, we expect to receive $89,000 in fiscal year 18, but we actually generated $94,000. Well, what that means is we came in a little bit under our revenue projection, a little bit over, I should say, we're a little bit under, so we generated a little bit more revenue than we anticipated, or about $4,000. At the end of the fiscal year, that $4,500 rolled into free cash, and it became part of certified free cash in the fall town meeting at the after fiscal year 18 was over. So when the Finance Committee budgets, we generally, because we don't know what fiscal year 19 is, we generally like to use a number that's about 85 to 90% of the actual prior year's number that we do have. So ideally, what we would like to use is when we were budgeting for fiscal year 19, for example, we budgeted 85,000. Really, our target that we would really like to have would be around, say, 90% of the actual prior year that we had. When we were doing 19, we didn't have these numbers for 18. Just like when we were doing 20, we didn't have 19s. Right? So when you go back a year, we didn't have this number and consequently this number. So we like to use about 85 to 90% of the prior year's actual, which in that case would have been fiscal 17. But unfortunately, because of pressures in demands of town government expenses and regional school system assessment, we've had to be exceptionally aggressive, for lack of a better term, with these numbers. And what you'll see is that we budgeted a little over 100% of the prior year's actuals. And we were comfortable doing that based upon feedback from the town accountant, who said, yeah, it looks like the trend is we're going to continue to get more money. However, here is a good example of why we don't like to budget aggressively with these revenue sources. Again, actual is the orange line, blue is the budgeted line. What do you see here in fiscal year 18? The actual came in lower than the budgeted. Because we had to be aggressive with trying to generate revenue in order to fund the increased demands on the town for revenue, we budgeted as anticipated revenue for local receipts $1.175 million. But when all was said and done, we only came in at $1.146 million. We missed the projection by $28,000. This is an example of why We do not want to be aggressive, overly aggressive with our revenue estimates. We want to be fair, we want to be equitable, but we also want to be fiscally conservative when we're budgeting. And this is a good example of why. Fortunately, we didn't miss it by much. We only missed it by 28,000, and the town made additional revenue in other areas which made up. For example, you just saw a meals tax, we got an extra $4,500, right? So this wasn't a big deal to recover from. But motor vehicle excise tax can be. Here are the motor vehicle excise tax historical data. So in fiscal year 18, we generated $2.2 million in motor vehicle excise tax. We budgeted for $1.9 million. So we ended up coming in over $331,000. These are the only two numbers that we have to work on when we're budgeting fiscal year 20. The problem with motor vehicle excise tax is this. You all have cars in town. You all get a tax bill for your car. What happens every single year when you get your tax bill, assuming you keep the same car? The tax goes down, right? Goes down. The way motor vehicle excise tax is computed, the car is assigned a value that remains constant throughout the life of the vehicle when it's on the tax roll. That number is then depreciated by a depreciation factor based upon the age of the vehicle. So the first year, you buy a 2018. In 2018, the depreciation factor is considered to be 90%. So they take 90% of the car's value, and that's what you're taxed on. By year 5, that percentage is 10%. So when the car is over 5 years old, you're taxed on 10% of that car's value. So you buy a $20,000 car in 2018. After 2023, you're going to be taxed on $2,000 of that vehicle's value. So the reason why this number has been going up, 2 reasons. One, more people have been moving into Rehoboth. And the people that do move into Rehoboth have more vehicles. So there are more vehicles on the tax rolls today than there were several years ago. The other reason why values have been continuing to go up is people continue to drop older vehicles off. So you take that 7-8-year-old vehicle that you're depreciated down to 10% of its value at, right? So you have that 7-year-old Corolla that you bought for 20 grand that now is taxed at $2,000, and you buy a brand new Corolla that's $20,000. Well, you're going to pay 90% of the $20,000 this year, not 10% on 2,000, tax on 2,000. So your tax bill, the other important takeaway from motor vehicle excise tax. Motor vehicle excise tax is not taxed the same way as your property tax. Motor vehicle excise tax is billed to you on a calendar year basis. So when we're starting the budgeting process in February, tax bills have just gone out. So we don't know what our collections are going to be for the motor vehicle excise tax. We don't know how many people have sold their cars or bought new cars, or how many people have decided, you know what, because my tax bill went up $800 or $400 because of the override last year, you know what, I'm not going to buy a new car this year, I'm putting it off another year. So we don't know that, because we're trying to budget for over here, but the only numbers that we have really are from 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, for the end of the prior fiscal year, because we're in fiscal year 19. So this number here, because of that variability in the depreciation factor, we do not like to be aggressive. We like to use a number that's around 85 to 90% of the prior year's actual when we budget a revenue estimate for motor vehicle excise tax. And if you look at the numbers, this $1.8 million is roughly around 90% of this $2 million number. This is an area where we can get into a lot of trouble real quick. If people decide not to buy new vehicles or replace those older vehicles, we could see a significant, like you see this number here, varies up and down quite a bit, by quite a bit. That number could go down quite a bit if people all of a sudden say, yeah, we're gonna hold off on buying that new car this year. We don't really like to mess with this. 85 to 90% is what we like to use. Keep this number in mind, $2.2 million. Okay? Keep that number in mind because we're going to talk about that in a minute. So let's talk a little bit about the budget that we put forward at town meeting and how we got there. We're going back to the nice colorful chart. Now that you kind of understand where these revenue sources come from and what they comprise of, let's take a look at them in more detail. Okay, so for fiscal year 20, our tax levy from the Department of Revenue is a little over $24.3 million. That's an increase of 2.99, almost $3 million. Wow, that's a real big increase. How come that's so much? Well, because this year's number is the tax levy, which actually is comprised of several of these numbers going forward. So if you take the local taxes levy limit, the new growth, the increase in the annual increase, the Proposition 2.5 override, so all bundle those together, they become the new tax levy for the next year. We continue to have the solar pilots and the new growth numbers provided to us by the assessors. The 2.5 tax increase is the number we're allowed annually by law. That comes to us from the Department of Revenue, and the debt exclusions comes to us from the town treasurer. We haven't passed an override yet this year, so that number is 0. That's why you see a negative number here, because we haven't passed an override. Not because the override money disappeared, not because the town decided to use it for something else, because this number, this $2.1 million number, becomes part of the tax levy next year. That's the way it works. Right? No hidden numbers, no super secret conspiracies out there that you write about on social media and handouts at town meeting. Okay? State aid, again, well, we did get a little bit of a bump in state aid, about $57,000, conservatively. What numbers did we use for really the 3 areas that the Finance Committee has the ability to go through the numbers and look at them and make some adjustments? Well, for motor vehicle excise, we actually increased our estimate by $150,000. Last year was $1.85 million. Remember, it was 2.2, the number that we just talked about a minute ago? Well, 90% of that number would be $2 million. So we're using a 90% number for motor vehicle excise tax, which is a conservative number, but gives us a little bit of a cushion, because we don't know. We just don't know. Are people going to be replacing their vehicles this year? We don't know. Local receipts. Remember, we missed the revenue estimates. We were short. So based upon the advice of the town accountant, who sets up, we pay money to sit there and do analysis, right? She comes to us, she says, really you ought to use a lesser number this year. You really ought to bring it down based upon what I'm seeing. You should use about $2.123 million, $2.1123 million. So that's what we ended up budgeting, what her estimate was, based upon her recommendation. And then finally, the meals tax, we bumped up a little bit because we saw that we had $94,000 the previous year. So, we bumped it up a little bit. Who knows if people are going to still go out at the same rate? We all got a tax increase last year that amounts to us cutting out household budgets. So now that additional money that we make, that's, look, we go out, we work jobs, right? We make a certain amount of money. If we have to pay more in property tax, that means that's less that we have to spend on something else, whether it be going out to eat or buying something for our family. Us here, individually, we collectively only make so much money for our household. The town is no different. The town only makes so much money annually as well. The numbers are just a lot larger, that's all. So when you add all those numbers up, the town expects to generate for fiscal year 20, which just started July 1st, $30.558 million. Now there are some mandatory reductions that we have to make, that the state gives us money, and then the state says, but you also have to pay us. That's $774,000. Part of that $774,000 was the snow and ice deficit that we had. We overspent for snow and ice removal last year by $41,000, Mike, I think it was. We have to take that off the tax levy going forward. So after we did that, what we had available for appropriation as part of what's referred to as raise and appropriate for the annual town meeting in May was $29,784,526. Now, of that money, we have appropriated at town meeting $10,813,667. That went to fund the town budget at $10.22 million, and an assessment from Bristol Plymouth Vocational High School of $550, I think it was around $550,000. And then we also pay tuition, to Bristol Aggie High School for the students that go there. We funded Bristol Plymouth asked, what Bristol Plymouth asked for, they got 100% of. What they asked for was the state mandated minimum that we have to give to them. That's all they asked for. That's what we gave them. Bristol Plymouth, we budget based upon the number of students we have and what they charge us for tuition. We never really know how many students we're gonna have. We're in May, right? We're budgeting for next year. We don't know how many students we're gonna have. Sometimes, so again, those of you that come to town meeting quite often, when you come to town meeting, you'll sometimes see a supplemental appropriation article in the fall town meeting to give more money to Bristol Plymouth. And that's because we end up with more students, or the tuition rate changes, something changes, and then we ended up not appropriating enough at town meeting in May. So we make an adjustment for Bristol Plymouth usually in the fall if we have to. So that leaves us within the normal tax levy limit of the town. This is effectively what is known as the tax levy of the town. Raise and appropriate, sometimes referred to as taxation. You hear those terms at town meeting bantered about quite a bit. That's what these numbers are. That leaves us available for appropriation $18.97 million. That number is what we recommended you fund the Dayton-Rehoboth Regional High School at, because that's all we had left when we looked at the numbers and all the money that we expected to generate, raise and appropriate. How did we arrive at that number? So there are two takeaways here I want you to focus on this chart. One, this $1.477 million number over here, and this $18.97 million number over here. What is this number? What is this $1.477 million number? That's how much revenue we are going to generate in fiscal year 20 over what we generated in fiscal year 19. So you see two columns here, fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 19, right? So you see 24 million, 21 million, positive 2.9 million. Right? Override 0, 2.1 million negative. So the debt exclusions went up, local receipts went down a little bit, motor vehicle excise went up 150,000. When you add up the differences, this is what we appropriated last year. This is what we anticipate raising in revenue for this year. We subtract the two. The town expects to raise for fiscal year 20 $1.477 million more than it did for fiscal year 19. And again, those are hard numbers in many cases that I've just explained to you come from either the Department of Revenue or subject matter experts like the town treasurer or the Board of Assessors. These aren't just fairy tale numbers that are made up when I read my daughter a story every night before she goes to bed. So, take these two numbers away, because we're gonna talk about them going forward. We have to be fair and equitable to all the stakeholders. You've heard a lot of, no doubt, many of you have heard criticisms of the Finance Committee. We're targeting the schools, we're not being fair to the schools. This is hardly the case. We have a community here we need to take care of, not only the town, but 3 school systems that we participate in. So, we have 4 articles that you vote on every single year at town meeting to fund different aspects of government. The first article at annual town meeting is Article number 2, which is the town government budget. That's your police, fire, highway department, your library, the building you're in now, the council on aging, all of the town services other than education. The other 3 budgets that you fund are for Dayton Rehoboth, for Bristol Plymouth, and for Bristol Aggie. And we break them out separately as separate articles because, again, we're supposed to approve the budget and vote an assessment for the regional school systems in accordance with Mass General Law. I'm only going to focus on 2 as part of this discussion because we funded Bristol Plymouth at 100% of what their request was. Their request was $512,000. That was a $25,000 increase year over year over what they got last year, or a 5.21% increase. But that's the state minimum. We're mandated to pay that according to the state. Don't have a choice. Bristol Aggie, as I said before, we pay on a tuition basis. So we just budgeted the tuition that we had for this last fiscal year 19, for fiscal 20, and we'll make an adjustment if we need to in the fall. So how can we be fair and equitable to both town government and the regional school system? This is a question that we're constantly being criticized about now. What the Finance Committee did very simply is we looked at, in fiscal year 19, what the relative percentages of the budgets were in fiscal year 19. Now I'm going to try to do something here, so I don't know if this is live, so we'll see if this actually works. So these columns here, ain't technology wonderful? It actually worked. Yeah. These columns here represent what we appropriated for fiscal year 19 and what the percent of all the town's revenue was for that appropriation. So in fiscal year 19, we appropriated to fund town government, police, fire, highway, and so on and so forth, $9.786 million. Go back to your town meeting warrant for May of 2018. We also appropriated last year $17.95 million for the regional school system, which includes the $2.1 million override. The $2.1 million is in this $17.9 million number. Those 2 numbers, that 9.7 represents 34.57% of all the revenue the town expected to receive, to generate for fiscal year 19. Likewise, the DR appropriation that we made represented 63%, 63.44%. So how can we be fair to all the stakeholders and not give preference to one versus the other? Well, what we said is, let's give 34% of that additional revenue we expect to generate in fiscal year 20 to the town. And then let's give 63% of the additional revenue we expect to generate in fiscal year 20 to the regional school system. So if you do the math, right, we expect to generate $1.477 million more. If you multiply that number by the percentage, you come up with what's called a target additional revenue. This was the target. We did not want to exceed this number. That target additional revenue number is how much additional revenue out of that $1.477 million we would want to use to fund that budget. So this number right here. And again, if you see, they all add up when you get down to the bottom, $1.477 million. So we're using all the additional revenue that the town expects to generate next year to fund these 4 budgets, the town budget and the 3 educational systems. Now, what was actually requested? When push came to shove, what were the requests that came in from the various stakeholders? And that's the next 4 columns. These 4 columns here. Well, let me focus on these 3 right here. So those 3 columns represent what was actually requested and what the change is. So the town budget, the finance committee is intimately involved with preparation of the town budget. We spend hundreds of hours preparing the town budget. We meet with every single department head multiple times to build a budget from $0 every single year. So when you hear criticism about, oh, well, the town, the finance committee didn't reduce anybody's budget, well, that's not true. We had people say, hey, I want to add another police officer this year. And guess what we had to say? We don't have the money. So you just don't see it, right? Because by the time we actually are at town meeting, all of those cuts that we've made in the requested increases have already been made. So after the finance committee built the budget for the town, in conjunction with the board of selectmen, who oversees some of the town budget as well, the request came in at $10.2 million. That was a $433,000 increase over last fiscal year, right? So this number here, subtract that number, you come up with this number. So the year-over-year increase in the town budget was $433,000. That represents a 4.43% increase. The 3 principal drivers of that increase, Selectman Schwal talked about this in his warrant article, a letter for the May town meeting. We got whacked with a $160,000 increase in our Bristol County pension assessment. We also have been traditionally under budgeting for our snow and ice removal for the past 15 years. And that number, that $200,000 number that we had been budgeting, hasn't been changed since probably the year 2000. And as Selectman Costello can tell you, the cost associated with snow removal has gone up significantly, and we've added a lot of roads in Rehoboth since that number was first created. We've been running deficits in the snow and ice line for, the past 5 years at least. So we needed to increase the snow and ice line this year to more accurately reflect what it was costing us to remove snow and ice from the road so you can get to work. That went up $50,000. Then we also had some other fixed cost increase in some other lines, like our legal line. This year we have union contracts that we're negotiating. We need to hire special counsel to assist us in negotiating those union contracts, for example. Plus, it's just a more litigious society, right? How many you drive down the road and you see billboards now, I can get you the money you deserve. And you can't get away from it. Everybody's suing everyone now. So we need more money in our legal line. So we had some real fixed costs, but if you take the snow and ice line and the pension assessment that went up, that's half of that $433,000 number. So it's not like we went out and splurged and everybody got a 10% increase in the salary in the town, in town government. That's not really how it works, despite what you may have heard. Now again, I'm not going to talk about BP and Bristol Ag. The Dayton Rehoboth Regional School System Assessment came in at $19.52 million. Do the math. That number is $1.57 million more than what we appropriated last year including the $2 million override. That increase, do the math, right? This is math 101. That's an 8.75% increase. You may have heard things like, well, the budget's only gone up 1.32%. The town of Rehoboth does not pay the budget of the regional school system. We pay an assessment. We pay a bill that we receive from the regional school system. That bill to the town of Rehoboth went up 8.75%. That is reality, despite what you may have heard. So, it's kind of like a magician, right? You all see magic tricks? You get a little shiny bauble over here while the guy's pulling the dove out of his shirt over here, right? So here's the 1.32% number. That's the shiny little bauble over here I want you to focus on. While I really jack you up with a 8.75% increase in the budget. Because that's the real number that we're dealing with, not 1.32%. Now, what I will say, I try to be fair. I can't tell you whether or not that number is really needed. I have said this, I think I've said it at town meeting. I assume it is, right? The finance committee, the board of selectmen, we are not involved at all with the regional school system budget. We don't prepare it, we don't vet it, we don't look at it, all we get is a bill. That's what we get. So, I can't tell you, people come to me and they say, Mike, do they really need the money? And I'm honest when I tell them, I don't know. I can't answer that because I don't vet their budget. That is a question to ask the regional school committee. All I can tell you as the finance committee chair is I don't have the money to fund it within the town's levy limit. Even if I gave every single dime of additional money that this town expects to receive next year, or this current fiscal year, if we gave every single dime, every single penny of that $1.477 million in additional revenue we expect to receive, guess what? It's not enough. We're still short $93,000 over last year. So, again, but hey, look, we also have a town that we have to run too. We do have, look, the schools have increases on the school side. They have increases in their pension assessment. They have increases in fixed cost increases as well, just like the town does. It's not that I'm unsympathetic. I'm not, right? I see it on the town side. I'm sure that they have those increases on the school side as well. That doesn't change the financial reality. The town will not raise the money within the levy limit to fund it. No matter how many meetings the finance committee and the school administration should have had between June and May and April that you've heard criticism about, we wouldn't have made more money. Magically money wouldn't have appeared if we met 30 times with the school administration over the course of the past 6 months. Nor do I think the school administration would have reduced their assessment less than what it currently is. So when you hear the finance committee criticize about, no, you didn't go talk to the school committee because we could have reached a compromise. Well, folks, I've given you all the money I already have. The only compromise that I have to give you above and beyond that would be, how much do you want to take out of the town budget? What town department do you want me to close? Because I don't have more money. There is no secret hoard of gold somewhere under the landfill that the town can tap into in order to fund the increased assessment. Right? There is no magic pot of money. We're not like Jack and the Beanstalk and we wouldn't plant the magic bean and all of a sudden our money tree would grow. The town expects to generate a certain amount of revenue. That's how much more we're going to generate next fiscal year. So what did we end up recommending? Right? Knowing all of that, what did the finance committee end up recommending? So again, I'm going to try to use high tech here. So this is what we ended up recommending. these columns right here. The Finance Committee ended up recommending $10.2 million for the town, which was a $433,000 increase. Why did I feel okay recommending that? Because remember, if I go back a slide, remember this target additional revenue? Right? If I take that $1.477 million number and I take 34% of it, which is the relative portion of town government, my target additional revenue was $510,000. But to fund town government, I only needed $433,000. That's a good thing, right? We kind of came in under budget, under the target, what we were expecting. So that means we have extra money, right? Right. So what did we do with that extra money? We stash it in the bank, we put it in our stocks? No. We gave it to the school system, right? So you see here in this column here, this additional revenue column, that $433,000 represents only 29.32% of additional revenue that the town expects to generate next year, or for the current fiscal year that we're in. All the additional money went to the school systems. Right? So we still, percent change, the Finance Committee recommendations here, right? The percent change, you'll notice down here, 1.477, which is oddly, strangely, the same amount that we expect to raise in additional revenue. All of it went to fund these budgets. And of those budgets, the target, remember the target, the 63% of the additional revenue would have been $937,000 for the regional school system. But we actually funded a little over $1 million because we had extra money. And you can see that over in these columns over here. And so these two columns here show you the amount additional plus or minus over target. So the town side came in $77,000 under the target. Of that $77,000, we used $74,000 and we gave it to the regional school system. We didn't turn around and say, geez, you know, there's $433,000. We should have been $510. Let's increase the budget on the town somewhere else and jack it up to $510,000. No, we didn't do that. What we did was we said, hey, we came in under target for the town. Let's give the money to the regional school system to be fair and equitable to all the stakeholders, not just one stakeholder over another. So that's where we're at. Those are the recommendations that the Finance Committee came up with, and that's how we arrived at the numbers. So in summary, for the budget, the town expects to generate $29,784,526 in revenue in fiscal year 20. That's an increase of $1.477 million over fiscal year 19. May town meeting has already appropriated $10.8 million to fund the town budget, the Bristol Plymouth VOTEC assessment, and the Bristol Aggie tuition charges. That leaves us $18.97 million within the town's regular levy limit to fund the DR assessment. And the Finance Committee at the May town meeting recommended using the full amount, the full $19.7 million to fund the DR assessment. That's a $1 million increase over last fiscal year, which included the $2.1 million override. So anybody that says, anytime you hear the words, the town didn't give us all the money from the override, they are lying to you. And I will use the word lying to you because these are numbers. They are hard numbers. Look, you know, you can have your political opinion on whether or not you should have an override, not have an override, but these are the hard numbers. One of the handouts at last town meeting allegedly said that we didn't give all the money to the school system from the override. It was a lie. You were lied to. You were manipulated. That is the reality. And for this coming fiscal year, we are not only recommending all of the money that we gave last fiscal year, but an additional $1 million on top of it. So, the town overall, if you go with the requests solely, those numbers going back, right? If we go with the request, what the requests were, right? if you go with the requests, the town of Rehoboth will not generate enough revenue in fiscal year 20 to meet all of the requested increases. That's true. We won't. So the Finance Committee took a fair and balanced approach to apportioning the town's additional revenue fairly and equitably between all of the stakeholders, according to the relative percentages of the town budget in the prior fiscal year. Despite our best attempts, the school system still wants more money. We do not have the money to give within the current levy limit of the town. So, if you want to fund the school system at the full request of the $19.5 million, that's a possibility. We would need to increase the levy limit of the town by $559,000 in order to create a sustainable stream of revenue to fund the school assessment every single year going forward. Because remember, keep in mind, how many times has the regional school budget gone down in recent memory? Never, right? Okay. So what's the likelihood it's going to be less next year? Not very likely. So if you use a non-reoccurring revenue source to fund the budget, next year the budget's going to go up over what it is that you're just approving this year. So you're going to need even yet more money next year to fund what you're funding this year. So you need a reoccurring revenue source to fund that operating expense. The proper fiscally responsible way to do that. And look, this is not politically popular, right? My job's not to be politically popular. It's to give you the facts. The fiscally responsible way to do that is to pass an override for the $559,000 so the money is there this year, next year, and every year going forward, just like the $2.1 million was there last year and is there again this year, built into the $18.9 million number that we're recommending. So the Finance Committee does not advocate for or against an override. It is my responsibility to advise you that that is the fiscally responsible option if you agree that the money the regional school system is requesting is needed. So, what happens next? That's the financial reality of things. We know where we are, how we got here, why the numbers are what they were, and now what happens next at town meeting. Well, really it boils down to who shows up and what they vote. What happens if you vote for an override election? So if you choose to fund the additional amount out of a Proposition 2.5 override, the selectmen, after town meeting, will schedule a ballot vote where all the town residents will have an opportunity to vote on raising their taxes. If you vote yes, we're done. The regional school system budget is approved at the appropriation that they've requested, the assessment that they've requested. It represents a permanent tax increase of 2.3% on your tax bill, above and beyond the annual normal 2.5 increase that you usually see, approximately. If you vote no, that vote constitutes the second rejection of the regional school budget. That's voting no on the override. So it goes out to override, you vote yes, we're done. They get their money. Goes up, we go out to the vote for the override fails. That then is constituting a second rejection of the regional school system budget. And then we go to the next step in Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16B, the tent meeting, which you've all heard all about. Tent meeting, yeah. Watch a school committee meeting, that's all they talk about, how they want to go to the tent meeting. We'll talk about the tent meeting in a minute. Your other option is to approve the Finance Committee recommendation at the amount requested. Right? So if you do that, you're approving funding up to the Finance Committee's recommended amount, which is within the levy limit of the town. That option also constitutes a rejection of the regional school system budget. The regional school committee then has a choice. It can make a choice. It can either accept the will of town meeting, which they disregarded on May 28th, and vote to reduce their assessment to match the appropriation made at town meeting, and to match what the town has voted. So again, I point you to examples of that where Dave Katz, a few years ago, had gotten up and made increases in the budget, and when it's failed, they've gone back and they've reduced their budget. So that's an option. The other option that they have that we really don't talk about a lot is we can also use what's called an alternative assessment methodology. They don't like to talk about this too much, but we were using an alternative assessment methodology up until 2015 when it then flipped to the statutory method. You can use an alternative assessment methodology to come up with an assessment to the town of Rehoboth. That is an option here, if in fact school committee members from Rehoboth fought for it. Or the regional school committee can then vote to hold what's called a district-wide meeting. And the district-wide meeting is where all residents from the member communities get together and accept or reject the budget. So that's the tent meeting. You've all heard about the tent meeting, watch a school committee meeting. We want to go to the tent meeting. Let's just go to the tent meeting. What is the tent meeting? The tent meeting is a process that's defined in Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16B, Paragraph 7. It exists so that a regional school district can get its budget set when the member communities cannot agree on a budget, i.e. do not vote for appropriations that match the assessment. It is effectively a group meeting of all the residents, all the registered voters of all the municipalities in the regional district, which in our case can constitute Stoughton and Rehoboth. The reason it's called a tent meeting is theoretically you need a really big tent to have everybody. We probably would not be able to have it at Dayton Rehoboth Regional High School because we're not going to fit everybody from Dayton and Rehoboth in it. We might have to have it somewhere else. Where that is, we don't know because the district sets the tent meeting. The district, the regional school district, produces the warrant for the tent meeting. It is not a process of the town. This is important. Town bylaw provisions do not apply to the tent meeting. So, for example, certain requirements that the town has to notify you of how they notify you don't apply in the case of a tent meeting. Getting a little hoarse. For example, Mass General Law does not require, the district does not have to mail you a copy of the warrant to your house, like we do to hold a special town meeting. That is not a requirement under Mass General Law for the tent meeting. Instead, what Mass General Law states, and I'll quote, "The warrant, which is produced by the regional district, shall state the time, place, and purpose of the meeting. The district shall give notice by posting a copy in the city or town clerk's office and at least 2 other public places, and further provide notice by publishing a copy of said warrant in at least 1 newspaper in general circulation within the member municipalities." What's that mean? Well, it means that the district could decide to hold a tent meeting at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. That's legal. Right? They could turn around and they can produce a warrant, they can give a copy to the town clerk, and they can hang a copy up at the bulletin board at Chartley and down at the town landfill. They don't have to send you a copy at your house like you just got with your town meeting warrant. And they have to publish a copy in the town, in a newspaper in general circulation in the town. So we have Joe Siegel here from the Sun Chronicle. So, for example, the Sun Chronicle newspaper is considered a newspaper of general circulation here in Rehoboth. But how many people actually get the Sun Chronicle? Probably not a whole heck of a lot of people in town get the Sun Chronicle and read it. So, when this happens, be paying attention because it could happen really quick And unless you're on top of it, it could happen before you know it. The tent meeting can be called immediately after the second rejection of the budget. So if we go to town meeting on the 16th and we reject the budget, the tent meeting can be called on the 17th. I guess theoretically it could be called the night of the 16th as well. Watch a school committee meeting, you know, they want that tent meeting. It does require a minimum of 14 days notice to the residents, but notice being defined, the caveats I gave you on the other slide. Newspaper, posting a couple of copies around town. It doesn't require them to mail you a copy of the warrant. The tent meeting votes to approve or reject the budget of the regional school system and to vote to set the assessments to the member communities. That is what is voted on at town meeting, at the tent meeting. It does not vote an appropriation to fund the assessment, which apparently some school committee members are under the misguided conception that they're gonna go to town meeting, they're gonna get everybody from Dayton to take money from Rehoboth at the tent meeting. That's not how it works.
That's an opinion, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's fine, and you have your meeting, so you can discuss your opinion at your meeting. This is our meeting, I'll discuss my slides at my meeting, thank you.
I'm not part of it.
So Mass General Law is specifically clear on this. You do not vote an appropriation from the town of Rehoboth at the tent meeting. You have to go to another town meeting to vote an appropriation to fund the assessment. That is voted at the tent meeting. If the tent meeting approves the budget at the amount currently requested by the school committee, then we would have to have another town meeting to decide how to fund it. And that would require either an override vote to increase the town's levy limit, reduction of the town would have to cannibalize the town budget in order to come up with the money to pay the increased assessment. We'd have to use another funding source like stabilization and put the town on a road to financial ruin. We'd have to somehow come up with the money in order to fund the assessment. Because legally, under Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16B, the only entity that can reduce an assessment to the town is the regional school committee. And once an assessment is approved, it has to be funded. It cannot be reduced by the town. So if we go to the tent meeting and the budget is approved with an increased assessment, the town has to somehow come up with the money to pay it. At the tent meeting doesn't say, we're gonna take it from your stabilization account. But the tent meeting says, you have to give us $19.5 million, now go back and figure out how you're gonna give it to us. The logical question is, town meeting is sacrosanct. What happens if we go to town meeting and the town meeting says we're just not funding it? That's a really good question. So if the tent meeting reduces the budget, if it rejects the budget, I should say, then you could always have another tent meeting. They can keep calling tent meetings until they get their way, until you eventually get tired of going to meetings. Right? They can just keep having them until enough people show up to vote for the budget they want. Or eventually you get state intervention. What happens with state intervention? You've heard a lot about this and how it's going to be a disaster. Well, there's two things that happen with state intervention when it comes to the budget. The first happens on July 1st. And on July 1st, the district goes on what's referred to as 1/12 budgeting. This has actually already happened. The district is currently on 1/12 budgeting. On December 1st, if there's still no budget, then the state steps in and assumes financial control of the district. Both of these clauses are defined in Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16B, in terms of what the process is. So what's the impact of state intervention on July 1st? This has actually already happened. As I said, the state sets a budget of $43.8 million which is last year's budget. So they set the budget to the last fiscal year budget. And the district is authorized to spend $3.65 million monthly going forward until the budget situation is rectified. So our contribution to that would be 1/12 monthly of our fiscal year 19's assessment, which was $1.5 million a month because we appropriated $17.9 million last year. And we've already funded appropriation at the May 28th town meeting of $18.9 million to cover that monthly contribution. So we can pay money now to the regional district for them to continue to operate until the budget situation is resolved. On December 1st, what happens? So let's say we go all the way to December 1st and we still don't have a budget in the district. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education steps in and they assumes financial control of the district. The state will set the budget of the district and then will set an assessment to the town of Rehoboth. And then, based upon our conversations with individuals, our contribution would likely be $18.9 million. It is highly unlikely that it would be more money because we already, that $18.9 million appropriation represents a $3.4 million amount above what the state says we have to contribute. And based upon our conversations with people at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they are highly reluctant to get involved in matters when it is an amount above what the state mandates we pay. They are principally concerned with issues when towns cannot fund what they say we have to. The town of Rehoboth has been very, very generous over the past several years, funding well above the state mandated minimum. If you approve the school committee's requested appropriation of $19.5 million, that is almost $4 million above the state mandated minimum amount. Just so you know, that's math. We would likely have to go back to another town meeting to find a funding source to appropriate money above the $18.9 million that we've already appropriated. So part 5, that brings us to conclusions, and I'm almost out of time. So once again, as you saw in previous slides, the regional school system assessment has increased at a rate higher than the town's ability to raise additional revenue. Additional revenue, $1.477 million. School assessment increase, $1.57 million. The school cannot fund the regional school system's request and continue to provide level-funded services to the residents. Sure, we could start cutting town services to fund a regional school budget. Keep in mind, in fiscal year 19, every $100 in property tax that you paid, $34.57 went to fund all town government services, police, fire, highway, COA, library, etc. $65.43 out of every $100 you paid in property tax went to pay for education. Of that, $63.44 went to pay our assessment at the Dayton-Rehoboth Regional School System. So it raises the question, how much is enough? How much do we have to give? 63% isn't enough, do we have to give 75%? 80%? 100%? How much is enough? Only you can answer that. Despite what you have heard, the town does not have a secret source of revenue it's hiding. There is no secret hoard of dragon's gold underneath the solar voltaic farm at the landfill. Either taxes have to go up, town services have to be cut to fund the increase in the regional school system assessment, or the annual rate of increase in spending in the regional school system has to decrease to a level where it stays within the town's ability to raise additional revenue year after year. The Finance Committee has repeatedly warned about this over the past half-decade. Go back and read my letters in the town meeting warrants going back 5 years. I have warned about this repeatedly, and here we are once again. The choice ultimately is up to all of you who attend town meeting. Do you want a town? Do you want a school system? Or do you want to balance the both? And that's what the Finance Committee did. The Finance Committee this year balanced both. We proportionally gave revenue to the schools and to the town based upon what their budgets were last year. Remember, you get the government you deserve. You don't go to town meeting and you don't make your voice be heard, don't complain about it later. Attend town meeting, let your voice be heard. Do you have questions for me? If you have questions, in a minute, okay? If you have questions outside of, in a minute, I'm gonna take questions on the presentation only. If you have questions about anything else that's not pertaining to the presentation, here's my email address, here's my telephone number. You can call me anytime you want, or you can send me an email, and I'm happy to spend as much time with you going through whatever questions you may have. If you have questions for the selectmen, you can call the selectmen's office at the number here, and the selectmen have a general web page where you can go and type a message in to send a message to the selectmen. Some additional information for additional viewing. Again, a copy of this presentation will be up on the town website, so we can, you'll be able to download and view these URLs. We have the Town Finances 101 video for you to watch. We also have the Property Taxes 101 video. Property Taxes 101 video is really good on telling you how your property tax is computed. It also helps dispel the myth that you constantly hear about how we have a low tax rate. Because you're constantly being told that our tax rate's not high enough. This video explains to you how the tax rate is computed. I'd also highly encourage you to watch a couple of school committee meetings. Go tent meeting, June 4th and June 25th. These are the URLs for those. So you can watch those. June 25th, as of doing this presentation, when I prepared it, the video wasn't up on demand yet. The June 25th meeting is really good because I'm like testifying before a Senate panel. I felt like a Trump cabinet member in front of Congress when I was at that meeting. So you can turn around and you can watch those. Those are really good meetings. I'm particularly partial to that one since I got a lot of airtime. Okay, that concludes the presentation. A copy will be made available on the town meeting website, the shortcut URL, once it's available. Thank you all for coming. Again, if you have any questions, I will turn it back over to Selectman Schwal, who will handle the question and answer portion.
Good presentation, Mike.
Thank you.
So if any Rehoboth resident has a question pertaining to anything that's covered in this presentation, you're more than welcome to come up to the microphone here at this little table. Please state your name and your address for the record and ask your question, and Mike will answer it. Go first.
Good evening, Robert Gagnon, 37 Center Street, Rehoboth. I noticed in one of the earlier slides that we weren't always a regional district, that we had a separate K through 8. Seems like we're not going to ever seem to be able to control our finances at the current rate we're going, since we're paying twice what Dayton is. Is there a way to go back to that? Is there a form or method to get back to a separate K through 8? That way we only have a small assessment we pay to the high school.
Yeah, I will, what I will say is, I'm not gonna answer that here. That's really a conversation outside of the scope of this presentation. If you'd like to sit down with me after, I'm happy to spend as much time kind of going through that with you.
Okay.
All right?
But you did mention.
I did talk about it. I mean, Selectman Vadney could tell you more about what school union was, and because I think of all the selectmen, he's probably the only one that was there on the board of selectmen way back 50, 60 years ago. So he can tell you the history, and I can fill you in a little bit about other things. Somebody else was over there, the lady in red. That was a movie, wasn't it, The Lady in Red?
So my name is Deborah Briglio. I live at 125 Spring Street here in Rehoboth. And my question is about one of the first slides that you showed, talking about the mass law, chapter 71, where it states, if you can bring back that slide, I'd appreciate it.
Well,
Where it says that they can, what the options were of the school committee to either reconsider, amend, and resubmit such. If you could bring that back.
Sure, I think I know which one you're referring to. Give me a second here. That's way back.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find it here. I think is this the one that you're referring to? Because this one talks about the 7 days.
Yeah.
That one,
So,
yeah.
the first thing it says, the regional school district committee shall have 30 days to reconsider, amend, and resubmit a budget on the basis of the issues based.
Right.
So it doesn't say they have the right to reconsider, amend, or resubmit. So if I'm reading that correctly, it's saying that they have the right to resubmit a reconsidered, amended budget. And somewhere it says something about and such.
Yeah, I guess maybe your question is that because they submitted the same exact thing
Exact
to us?
one.
Okay, well, look, it's really a distinction without a difference because the regional school committee could vote a new budget that's 1 cent less than what their prior assessment was, and we're still going through the same process.
That may be fine what you're saying, but if the law, as worded, states that they can't do this to us right now in this instance, which I think we need to look into that. If that's the wording on that, we need to go by the wording of what it says and not say, okay, well, weren't clever enough to do 1 cent. Right now, I don't know that we should be facing this at this point in time.
Very good point.
You
Very
should-
good point.
I'll answer this because I read that and then I went to DESI and I looked at some of the guidance that they have provided over the years. And then one of the things that I read, and I have a copy of it if you would like to see it, it does specifically say in there that a school committee is under no obligation after they go through the process of discussing to change their assessment. They're not required to change the assessment after they discuss.
But are they allowed to resubmit?
Yes,
They are.
without changing, yes, they are.
That was my.
I want to be fair, okay, because
Yeah, that's-
I felt the
that's
same
fine.
way. I will say that I don't really, there's a reason that they give 30 days to discuss. The law was followed, we'll leave it at that.
That's what I wanted to
Okay,
make sure.
we'll leave it because
Thank you
that's.
very much.
Thank you,
Good point, though.
good question.
Gentleman in the back there, in that.
Hi, John Hurst, 8 Woodland Way, Rehoboth. Couple of just quick questions. Was the school committee aware of our maximum amount that we had available when they actually came up with their budget?
Were they aware of the total levy limit of the town?
The cap.
I can't answer that because I don't know. What I can tell you is that there is a finance committee member that sits on the school committee.
Mhm.
I don't know if he communicated that to the school district or not, because I don't, despite what people may think, I don't make it a point necessarily of sitting around watching school committee meetings. So that's their committee, they run their committee as they see fit. So,
There's also an advisory committee
right, yes.
for the budget process, and that
Yes.
question could have been asked during that if it was or not, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not on the advisory committee either, so I can't answer the question, unfortunately.
It's just another quick here. Is ambulance revenue in our revenue sources?
Ambulance?
Yeah.
No, ambulance is a completely third party. It's got nothing to do with the town. The ambulance committee is a vendor to the town of Rehoboth. We have a contractual agreement with them to provide ambulance services. They are not a town department.
Do they pay us?
They do not pay us.
We do
They
contribute.
provide
We do-
service for free.
Yeah, but
They
every
operate,
time we take an ambulance, it's $2,000.
right,
Right,
that's
so
what they
something like
use
that.
to operate their
That's
ambulances
how they
and
buy
their
the
services.
ambulances and support their personnel, pay their personnel and get supplies and stuff like that. They don't take money from the town to do that.
The only thing we provide them with is a heated building.
And if you
And fuel.
Who could I discuss that further with?
The ambulance,
Yeah,
Scott Deeger is the chairman of the ambulance committee.
I'm sorry, his last name?
MEAGH.
That's about a couple $1 million in revenue.
But it's private money, it's nothing to do with the town of Rehoboth, it's a private contracted service.
Sure.
And they also purchase their own ambulances. I forget the
Right.
one that they're looking at right now, somewhere around $700,000.
Almost $500,000 for an ambulance.
Right, it's the same as if Dunkin' Donuts were to open a
Oh, I know.
kiosk in this building.
They keep full-time EMTs and paramedics on during the day, so
Okay,
that's a cost of.
sure.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions related to the informational session?
David Ferrera, 116 School Street. I want to get educated here tonight. When the school committee sends their budget to you, is it itemized? Is it a line-by-line thing? Where does all this money go?
The town does not see the budget of the regional school system, as I indicated in one of my initial
So
slides.
don't you think that's kind of
No,
ridiculous?
well, again, this is the process that's defined in Mass General Law, where my personal feelings are irrelevant. Okay, what I would tell you is that you elect regional school committee members to represent your interests
Correct.
in seeing that the financial stability and management of the regional school system is done properly. So if you have an issue with the budget of the regional school system, the appropriate place to vet those concerns is with the regional school committee. What I deal with as the town's finance committee is I deal solely with an assessment. That's all I deal with. That's my bill that I get, just like I get a bill for electric for the town buildings, right? And I have to fund an assessment, I have to fund an appropriation to pay that assessment. So that's what we do, that's what this process is. It's a little bit different, obviously, than National Grid because it's a regional district and therefore the process is defined in Mass General Law. But if you want to view a detailed copy of the regional school budget, they apparently do make a copy available on their website somewhere that you can download and you can view.
Where is that somewhere?
I can't tell you because I'm not involved with the regional school committee.
Oh, we go on their website, the high school
Yeah,
website.
I can't tell you.
District.
Perhaps before you leave, the chair of the PR school committee sitting behind you, maybe Ms. Cooper would be able to answer that question for you.
Just go to the DR website.
Oh, could you come up and give the answer and people could hear
Here
it?
she's coming up in a second.
All right, thank you.
Come up and give the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Degnan.
You're welcome.
You speak the answer. Thank you.
Please, please.
Okay, Kathy Cooper.
Let's wait till we get to the microphone, Ms. Cooper. Thank you.
Kathy Cooper, the
Your address, please.
96 New Street.
Okay.
The budget is listed on the DR website and it's under the central office tab. And it's right there in the center, partway down the page. And somebody asked before if the school committee was aware of the revenues funds that were available for the town, and the answer to that is no, that when we submitted the budget, it was originally 2.32, and then we did reduce down to 1.32 after that, and we didn't have a meeting with finance committee, so we never discussed what the revenue amounts were. My question here is, the warrant last year says that in order to balance the budget, the finance committee's difficult recommendation is to decrease the school department's above the required net school spending line item by the remaining deficit amount. It then goes on to say it should be recognized that there is also a portion of the recommended above net school spending decrease, which also balances the town departmental budget increases, meaning the town departments will realize a year-over-year increase in excess of $800,000 from the reduction of the school department's above net school spending as well. So when you're saying that the $2.1 million was completely added to last year's budget, it wasn't, because the FinCom recommendation from last year was reduced from the prior year even, because in FY18 it was 16.4 million, and last year it was reduced down to 15.9 million, and it's written right in here, and it was written by you,
No, it wasn't written by me, it was
the
written by,
Finance Committee.
it was written by Doug Furtado, it wasn't written by me.
So
But
how do you,
however,
how do you
however,
explain?
Ms. Cooper, I'm not gonna get into rehashing ancient history from May of 2018. But what I will say to the people here that have questions about whether or not the regional school committee got the full $2.1 million last year is I will happily provide you with a copy of the printout from the town's accounting system, which shows that an appropriation was put into the account which pays the regional school system totaling $17.9 million, and over the course of the year, the town voted, or the town, I should say, that's what we voted at town meeting, 17.9, which included $2.1 million for an override. Of that $17.9 million, checks were written to the regional school system in the amount of $17.9 million. So the regional school system got all of the money that was appropriated to it last fiscal year, which includes a $2.1 million override. That is right in the accounting system in Munis, which you worked in the town accountant's office, so you're familiar with. So if you'd
You're
like,
also
if
reducing the number
you'd
before you
like,
do that.
I will happily give you a copy of that printout so that
No,
you
I've
can
seen
review it yourself. So,
But you're missing what you're saying in it. You're
I'm not-
missing
look, I'm not-
reducing the
again,
budget.
do you have-
This is our meeting, not a school
do
committee.
you,
We're
do
not
you
gonna
have
debate.
a, do you
We're
have
not
a
gonna
question?
Excuse me.
I'm
We're
sorry.
not gonna interrupt each other.
No,
You asked your question, Mr. Degman's answering it. When he's finished, if you have a follow-up, I will allow that. We are not going to rehash 2018, 2019.
But he's,
We're talking about this issue here. That has been litigated 20 times. We are required by state law in the first year that an override is passed, that the amount of that override must 100% be given to the party that, for the reason of the override. That was done. We have been audited. The DOR has it. The town clerk is certified. The treasurer has moved the money. The accountant has accounted for it. The auditors have verified it. The override of $2.1 million, every penny of it was sent. This year, we were not obligated to appropriate $2.1 million to the schools, but we gladly did. So $2.1 million of that override that was passed last year, not only went last year, but every penny of it went this year, plus additional funds. So to come up here and insinuate that some had, to perpetuate this lie that people are putting out in the press and not even having the courtesy of signing their name to it, again, I'll use that word, it's a lie. Enough. Do you
I'm
have another
asking-
question?
yes, I'm asking the question. I'm asking the question because you're saying it's a lie, but I'm reading the information you wrote in the warrant.
Asked and answered, you should have submitted asked and answered.
Okay.
You
But
have
it doesn't explain
asked and
this.
answered.
It was voted, there's letters. You say things, you put letters out, we write letters, we do things. All that matters is what town meeting votes. Town meeting voted to go to a ballot vote. The residents of this town went out and supported overwhelmingly, including every member of this board, showed up and voted in favor of that override, and every penny of it went. And I resent the fact that you come up here and some of you sit in the school committee meetings and constantly bully and harass the fine residents of this town. And that's what you're doing now.
No,
So
No,
I'm
I'm
ruling you out of
asking,
order.
we're doing.
I'm
Asked
asking,
and answered. Next. Is
No,
there
you're
another
done.
question?
I'm asking an
Different
explanation.
question,
Is there-
is there a different question, Kathy? Is there a different question, because you're done with that one?
But you're not,
Do you have another question, ma'am?
no,
that you're all done.
And
I
have
think it's
fun,
funny, Glenn.
have fun on
I think
social
it's funny
media.
because you guys are calling her a bully and you're sitting there yelling at her like a bunch of pansies.
Oh, wait a minute, what was it, the phrase called, cravenly? Okay, I got it.
Wait,
Craven.
Act civil, please,
Graven?
please. Thank you.
We,
I ask that we all act civil and we respect each other and do not do what has been done already. And let's move forward with this, trying to fix our town and fix our finances and not be, doing what has been done in the past. That's all I gotta say.
Are there any other questions?
yes, ma'am. I like your bag.
Well, thank you. Joy Cambria, 163 Homestead Ave. Can you please clarify that, what she just brought up? Because I think that's gonna cause a lot of confusion. What is that in the warrant, the 800,000 reduction? What does that mean?
No, what, if I may, Mr. Chairman, do I have permission? If you go back, this is real long history. If you remember in 2015, we had a $1.75 million swing in the regional school system assessment, which the school system, with who was currently the chair was Tiffany Bartholomew, way back then, organized a campaign to take an additional $1.75 million from the town, out of the town budget, and not make it contingent on an override. That created a scenario where the town, and at the time, Selectman Schwar was on the finance committee with me, we had to spend many, many hours trying to figure out a way to then somehow cut the town budget to, because we didn't have the revenue for that $1.75 million increase. The next fiscal year 16, we got whacked with another huge increase in the school assessment. And what we had to do that year was we had to use $400,000 in free cash to balance all of the budgets, right? So, because when I say balance the budget, I'm referring to the town budget, the school budget, the Bristol Plymouth, all of those, like the town generates X amount of revenue, we have Y amount of bills, and the difference between those two, we needed to cough up $400,000 out of free cash, which is a non-reoccurring revenue source and is not sound financial policy. But we did it because we had to. There was no other way to do it, and quite frankly, at the time, all that would have ended up happening is if we didn't do it, we would have gone to town meeting, and then the same group that showed up and took the 1.75 would have showed up and taken the 400,000 out of the town, and Sharon Schwall and I would have been back there again that year trying to find another $400,000 in cuts. And Selectman Costello can tell you that probably to this day, he's still trying to recover his highway department that was decimated that year. And slowly over the past 5 years, we've slowly been able to kind of rebuild to where we're at. So that was fiscal year 16. In fiscal year 17, things really didn't get any better. We had to use $390,000 in free cash in order to balance between those four numbers. So let me bring up, if I can, that chart. Because I really do want to explain this, and I do appreciate Chairman Schwall giving me the opportunity here. Because this is a fallacy that's being propagated, and you're right, it does confuse a lot of people. So this number is what we expect to raise in terms of revenue, which equals our appropriations. Let me go back one slide. If I can find that clicker, there it is. Okay, so in this year, right? So for this fiscal year 20, we expect to raise. Our requests came in at 30 million, but we only expect to raise 29. Right, so the gap is 500,000. that same event occurred in 2016. We had to use $400,000 to make it work, right? So rather than saying, well, we can't really fund this, so we're gonna reduce the assessment and reduce town government again, we just kicked in $400,000 in free cash in fiscal year 16. But I remember having a meeting with Dr. Azar, and I think he came to the finance committee meeting, and I said, you know, we really can't keep doing this, because some year it's not gonna be there. So come next year, fiscal year 17 comes, and guess what, we gotta do it again. We gotta kick in more free cash. That wasn't as much, it was about $390,000 in free cash, roughly. But again, we had to do it, and from the finance committee's perspective, we were like, okay, well, at least the number's going down, right? So it was 400, then it was 390, at least it's going that way, right? It's not going that way. So we did it again. We voted for it again at town meeting in fiscal year 17. Fiscal year 18 comes. Guess how much free cash we had to use? $922,000 in free cash. Now, one of the big complaints that we heard from Dr. Azar was that it's unfair of you to put it all on the schools, because, remember you heard this all the time, we're all in this together. Remember that? Right? So if you go back and you look at your warrant for fiscal year 18, so it'd be the May 2017 town meeting warrant. We're like, okay, well, all right, so if we're all in this together, we'll divvy up that $922,000 in free cash that we have to use in order to get us to what the difference was between what we expect to bring in for revenue and what all the requests are from these entities. Right? Now we need an additional $922,000. We'll divvy it up roughly 2/3, 1/3. So we'll use about $300,000 in free cash to quote unquote balance the town budget, and then we'll use $600,000 in free cash to balance the school budget, right? So if you look at the certifications, the official certifications, go to the town clerk's office, get the certifications from the May town meeting in 2017 for the fiscal year 18 budget. You will see that the town funded the town budget out of raise and appropriate for a certain dollar amount, and then a certain dollar amount for free cash. And then on the school budget, it was the same thing. They funded X number of dollars out of raise and appropriate, and then another number out of free cash, because we're all in it together. So we took that $922,000 and we divvied it up between the two. That was fiscal year 2018. What happened last fiscal year, a year ago? Free cash is a non-reoccurring revenue source. Guess what? It wasn't there last year. We didn't have $922,000 to help balance the budget. And not only was it $922,000, but the school budget increased an additional $1.3 million on top of that. So we had to make up the $922,000 that we spent out of our savings the year before that we don't have this year, plus the $1.3 million that the school increase was. So when you add the $922,000 and the $1.3 million, you come up with the $2.115 million override number. That is how the $2.1 million override number came into being. Last year, watch the school, I think we were filmed last year, I don't remember. When the school assessment came in, it was $3.2 million above what we had. It subsequently got down to 2.11, so it was reduced by about $1 million overall. And now how they made that reduction, I don't know. But, so when Ms. Cooper talks about Doug's letter that Doug wrote, Doug is the vice chairman of the finance committee, how he described it in the warrant, he was trying to talk about the fact that over the $922,000 that we had to use in free cash, yes, the override to some degree benefits the town because the budget overall has been going up year over year over year. But when you look at the override, last year, I'll give you a copy of the certified vote at town meeting. The appropriation at town meeting last year was for $15.8 million out of raise and appropriate, and $2.1 million out of the override, totaling $17.9 million. That is what town meeting voted. Had the override failed, the appropriation to the regional school system last year would have been $15.8 million. But it wasn't. The people in Rehoboth stepped up and they said, okay, let's raise our taxes, let's pay the increase. And part of that increase is all that free cash that we've had to use all those years going back. Because fundamentally, the increases in the regional school system assessment have been unsustainable to the town of Rehoboth and its revenue. The town doesn't generate enough revenue year over year to fund the increases in the regional school system assessment. So the override was to kind of get us back to a point last year. It brought us to parity to where last year was. Right? So it made up the $922,000 that we had to take out of free cash the year before, plus fund what the regional school system wanted for their increase of the $1.3 million last year. That got us to the $2.1 million number. Hopefully that explains it to you a little bit better without the drama.
Well, I just wanna know that you guys nobody reduced anything by 800,000 according to whatever letter that was talked about.
No, well, again, I mean, I
They're all
don't,
tallied
look,
the
well,
way-
you know, people, you've been a town resident for ages, you remember the mid 2000s, people can put out letters that say whatever the heck they want. Every now and then a letter comes out with a picture of a Taj Mahal on it, right?
I know.
Right, so you've been around long enough to know people
Yes.
produce whatever they want. So, you know, but this fallacy that somehow that you know, the town stole $800,000 is
That's what I
just
wanna
that.
know, is it a fallacy?
No,
That's all.
it's basically, it's a made up number.
Okay.
But how they're trying to couch that number is they're saying, well, you know, you had all this free cash that the town had to use to balance the budget, and now the free cash, the town's somehow benefiting because that free cash it's not like we passed a $2.1 million override and all of a sudden the free cash went back to the town. No, that's not how it works. If you didn't have the $2.1 million, the assessment or the appropriation to the school system would have been $15.8 million, right? Because we didn't have the $922,000 extra.
I get that.
So hopefully that answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for in allowing me the opportunity.
Can I just wanna ask one more question, what do we have in free cash and stabilization now, do we have a number?
We have about $8,000 in free cash, and stabilization is around 1.9 million. I'm sorry, 1.39 million.
And is there any way we can be forced to
What
use
was that number again,
stabilization?
Mike?
1.39. In stabilization goes up about 30,000 a year roughly, and that's from the interest we get on stabilization. We haven't put any money into stabilization, I can remember in recent history. The money that's in stabilization now grows at about 30,000 a year, solely based upon the investments that we have. That money is invested by the town treasurer. I'm sorry, so go ahead.
No, I just asked if there's any way that we can actually be forced to take that money out of stabilization if we can't satisfy the school's appetite. We can't be forced, so it's gotta definitely be our decision.
We can use the budget if we wanted to, or take it out of stabilization. There's ways that we can do it.
Town meeting can make an appropriation out of stabilization.
Yes, that's right. The
Okay.
town meeting.
But it's up to
someone
us
amended
as a
it,
town.
us,
Okay.
instead of
That's all I wanna know,
stabilization.
thank you. I think you did a great job too.
Oh, thank you.
I think you got a pretty bad rap yet. All of you.
I've tried to keep this rather impersonal and factual tonight. Go ahead. I like that, that's a pretty dress. My wife has a dress in that color.
It's the belly that's growing.
Yeah, my wife just lost hers, so.
So I'm Nicole Gardella and I live on 5 Bellwoods Drive. So I first wanna thank you for the education. I'm kind of newer to town, and have been through this like from last year to this year and kind of gotten this whirlwind, so I appreciate the education. A recurring theme that I'm hearing is we have a budget that exceeds the revenue that the town is bringing in. And this may or may not be something you can speak to, but I'm very like solution-based in my head, and it sounds like we did this last year, we're doing it this year. Regardless of the results of this year, sounds like next year is gonna look very similar, and based on what you've described in the last segment, this has been an issue for many years before I was even in town. So the question is, maybe it's not to finance committee, maybe it's not to you. If it's to somebody else, I would love the conversation. Where or what is the plan in generating additional revenue to cover the increasing costs that the town is currently being faced with?
Would you like me to answer that, Mr.
The
Chairman?
problem we have in this town is we have no water, number one. So, for us to attract, commercial business, which would be a generator, like Seacon has an enormous, amount of, commercial water, as you see on Route 6. We just don't have that because we can't attract that. The other thing, we can't, do it because, we have a 300-foot setback for our commercial bylaw for zoning. And that makes it, inadequate for a commercial building to go in there and also have, if it's over the state limit of its size of 7,000, I believe it's 7,000 square feet, it needs sprinklers. Okay, so it would be very costly, to give you an example of that, Scotty's Furniture in Swansea wasn't able to get water from the town, so they had to put that big tower in, that's a water tower that feeds their sprinkler system. So it'd be very costly for them. So we can't get a CVS because, in fact, I checked this when I was, years ago, I was looking into this and found out CVS has a minimum of 10,000 square feet. So to attract this business here, to get that, all we get is residential property tax, basically. And we have a one tax system where, Seacon has a two tax system where the commercial is higher than their residential. So that's where they can up there. You know, it's a lot easier to go to the commercial base and raise them a little bit than it is the taxpayers, because they're the voting base.
If I may.
Go ahead.
The town's principal source of revenue is its tax levy, and if you were looking at a warrant for the town revenue sources, that's like our job. You and I work for a living, we get a paycheck. The town's tax levy is its paycheck. 92% of the tax levy in Rehoboth is residential. The other 7% is commercial, industrial, personal property. Much of the commercial property are farms. So I want to make one small clarification of what Selectman Costello said about what's called split tax rates. What split tax rates do is they change the ratio of how properties are taxed. What they don't do is they do not raise more revenue, because the revenue increase is limited by Proposition 2.5. So changing what's called the split, right? Sometimes you'll hear assessors refer to the split, the tax rate split. You can change the split between residential, commercial, and industrial property and have multiple tax rates. But even if the town had multiple tax rates, we can still only generate that $24 million in tax. That's the maximum amount our tax levy is. Changing the split doesn't change the amount of tax. What it does do is it maybe reduces your tax on your home in exchange for taxing commercial properties a little higher. The town of Rehoboth is not likely to generate a lot of additional revenue in commercial property tax. It takes, our current tax rate is $13.11 per thousand. So for us to generate an additional $1 million in tax revenue, it would require $76 million worth of property being built. So to get the additional 550,000 would be about $38 million. We're not gonna get $38 million of new property being built in Rehoboth in 1 year to get an additional $1 million. So unfortunately, this is not a solution that is going to be coming anytime soon, and quite frankly, it's probably not gonna happen for a multitude of reasons. Look, people move to Rehoboth because they like the rural characteristic. So if you want to turn Route 44 into Route 6 in Seekonk, will it happen? Sure. Eventually, over time, the population density of Rehoboth will change. If we got town water, town sewer, for instance, you could go down to 4,000 square foot lots. So over time, over 50 years, Rehoboth could end up looking like East Providence, right? But that's not why people move here. And we have had discussion about a pot facility down on Barney Ave in Rehoboth. And oh my God, the people turned out and they were all upset about this. Well, that's a new source of revenue, right? So people kind of want to have it both ways. They, on the one hand, and because the finance committee is supposed to solve this problem somehow, it's somehow my problem. I'm supposed to somehow figure out how to get new businesses to come to Rehoboth. Retail is dead, right? So Amazon has killed retail. What happens in Seekonk isn't likely to happen in Rehoboth because one, we have about 2 miles on Route 6, roughly, and quite frankly, Seekonk exists because people come over from Rhode Island, where they pay 7%, to shop in Massachusetts because they save sales tax. Go and park in the parking lots down in Seekonk and count the number of Rhode Island license plates. That's why Seekonk is so successful. Retail is dead. Look at Swansea Mall. It just closed. So the likelihood that we're going to get Best Buy and CVS and all these big companies to move into Rehoboth in the short term to solve this revenue problem is very unlikely to happen. The only real way to handle this problem is to restrain the growth of government by controlling spending increases.
No, what we do is we look in, this board looks into alternative revenue sources, like the solar projects we do, other things that we can look at to try to generate revenue in town. And as you see, if you follow any of the budgeting in this town, we run as lean can be, okay? Just to give you a simple example is, Dayton Highway Department has the same amount of budget as I do. I have 150 miles of road, Dayton has 60, okay? And they have the same amount of budget that I do, okay? So every department has to run real lean in this town to keep the budget where it is. So when we get a situation with a school like this, it's very hard for us to generate that amount to try to give it to the schools. And it's very hard for us because we run so lean to reduce our budgets. As Mike said earlier, a few years back, they reduced the highway budget, and I'm still trying to recoup that money. It wasn't for Chapter 90 money, your roads would be atrocious.
But that would help the speed problem we have on some of the roads too. Except for I have a lot of potholes and gravel. So, yeah.
I mean, I appreciate the fact and all of the work that you do to get the town to where it needs and where that balance is. The problem runs in that, I mean, everything goes up in price and nothing goes down. And banking on your neighbor getting a brand new car is just not a great source of revenue to put money on, you know what I mean? So,
The other thing we do too is, well, all right, as Mike said, our source of income is the tax levy. Having new homes move in doesn't always help either, because the average is 1.5 children per home. So if we get empty nesters, like if we get a 40B or something like that, where it is an age restriction, where you don't get the families that are going to school, the children that go to school, then you capitalize on that, but you get the subdivision in that everyone has a couple of kids, or is going to have 3 kids, or like yourself gonna have one, you know, that's eventually gonna go to the school system, so.
And your child will cost us about $14,000. But
I
how much,
appreciate that
but
money
how much,
ahead
but
of
how,
time.
but how much,
Just letting
how
you
much
know.
did your,
You have no idea how much this child's costing me.
oh, but I have a 1-month-old, believe me, I know how much it costs. So,
She's putting towards that, right now, because the child,
That's
for 5
right.
years, for 5 years she'll be banking.
I love problem solvers, so what I would say to you is, the selectmen have an economic development commission, submit a talent bank form to the board of selectmen to get appointed to the town's economic development commission, and help us identify new revenue sources.
I would love to help, and I've said it at least on social media before, but I practice medicine, and my population are elderly that are too sick to go into the office, so I do home visits. And there has been in the past a lot of communication in regards to some solutions for the elderly population in this community, and so I'm not a social worker, but I do have a lot of resources that if I can help, that's fine. So I'll give a little, you give a little, and you know, maybe we can get a CVS in 10 years.
We'll work on it.
But thank you.
We got Anawan Pharmacy, that's all we need.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, maybe pharmacy isn't what we need, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mike, you've been very generous with your time. You said you had a hard stop at 8:30, it's 20 after 9. So
I know, but this is
we'll
important
bring
to
this
the town.
a conclusion. I have one bit of business left. Ms. Cooper, I know you're in the back. Ms. Cooper, I know you're in the back, and stay there. This is directed towards you. I apologize to you, not for what I said, but for the way that I said it. It was inappropriate. This board is better than I embarrass my fellow selectmen. So I stand by what I said, and I'm very tired of people saying to us that we did not honor our obligations to the residents of this town, to the voters who supported the override, to the schools. I allowed my emotions to get the better of me. It was not appropriate. It's what I criticize other boards and commissions for doing. So I apologize to you, Ms. Cooper. I apologize to the audience members that you had to hear that. I apologize to those at home who had their sound go like this on the television. And I apologize to my fellow selectmen because it was inappropriate, and Michael, you're right. So with that, Michael, thank you.
Thank you,
And I
Mr. Chair.
apologize to you.
It's okay. I understand the
And
frustration.
Officer Tabacco, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So anyway, with that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.